The story opens with a glimpse of a beautiful woman named Bhumi, who currently works as a designer at a company in India. However, her job often forces her to return home late at night. Bhumi is known to be a cheerful and lively person, but her life has not been without hardship. She lost her mother at a young age and has been raised by her loving father, Arun. Apparently, Arun adores his daughter so much that he has never even considered remarrying, choosing instead to devote himself entirely to Bhumi. It was revealed that Arun is the owner of a shoe store, and though he is a kind and caring father, he has a dark habit. He is addicted to alcohol, which leaves him drunk every night. Each time he drinks, he is accompanied by his close friend, Taj. The two are so inseparable that Bhumi has come to regard Taj as her uncle. One evening, the two men were seen discussing Bhumi's upcoming wedding, which is scheduled for the following month. Bhumi is set to marry a doctor named Niraj, whom they believe is the perfect match for her. The next day, Arun heads to his shoe store on his old Vespa. There, he and Taj busy themselves with preparing and organizing the wedding invitations to be distributed to relatives and acquaintances. Overwhelmed with joy, Arun even offers a 10% discount to his customers as a celebration of his daughter's upcoming marriage. Elsewhere, a young man named Jitu is seen being scolded by his older sister for always being late to pick her up. Jitu is 17 years old and on the verge of celebrating his birthday. It turns out that Jitu is the one who often drives Bhumi to and from work, and over time, he has come to see her as an older sister. Back at the shoe store, Arun begins delivering wedding invitations to his neighbors, including Vishal, who runs a sweet shop owned by his mother. Vishal is heartbroken when he learns of Bhumi's impending marriage. Unbeknownst to her, Vishal has been in love with Bhumi for years. However, he has never mustered the courage to confess his feelings, and Bhumi has always seen him as nothing more than a friend. His love, it seems, has always been one-sided. One day, Vishal seeks out his maternal uncle, Dolly, the owner of a local cinema called Bhagwan Talkies. Dolly is a formidable figure, aided by his henchman, Ghulam, a skilled tattoo artist. Dolly is known for his ruthless nature, often harming those who oppose him. During their meeting, Vishal confides in Dolly about his unrequited love for Bhumi, who is about to marry another man. At that moment, Dolly advises Vishal to confront Bhumi one last time and express his feelings openly. If she rejects him again, Dolly promises to help Vishal win her over by any means necessary. Taking his uncle's advice to heart, Vishal approaches Bhumi a few days before the wedding. He pours his heart out, confessing his deep love for her. Bhumi, however, is furious. She accuses him of being out of his mind and demands that he leave. But Vishal persists, refusing to back down. In a fit of anger, Bhumi slaps him, leaving Vishal humiliated and devastated. A few days before her wedding, Bhumi is still busy with work. She calls Niraj and asks him to meet her and pick her up after work. However, Niraj declines, explaining that he is preoccupied with wedding preparations. As a result, Bhumi is driven home by Jitu, as usual. During the journey, Jitu suddenly stops to relieve himself. When he returns, he is shocked to find that Bhumi has vanished. Unbeknownst to him, Bhumi has been kidnapped by Vishal, Dolly, and Ghulam, who take her to Dolly's cinema, Bhagwan Talkies. By the time Bhumi regains partial consciousness, she is under the influence of drugs. Tragically, she is then subjected to a horrific assault by Vishal, Dolly, and Ghulam, who take turns violating her. When Bhumi finally awakens, she realizes the unspeakable crime that has been committed against her, though she remains unaware of the identities of her attackers. Overwhelmed with grief and shame, she returns home, her spirit shattered and her honor tarnished. Meanwhile, Taj's wife learns of the incident and urges Bhumi to keep it a secret, even from her father. Fearing that revealing the truth would not only cancel the wedding schedule for the next day, but also ruin her father's reputation. The following day, the wedding ceremony proceeds as planned, filled with celebration and joy. However, before the truth of her ordeal can be revealed, Bhumi confides in her fiancé, Niraj, about what happened. Devastated by her confession, Niraj immediately calls off the wedding, leaving Bhumi heartbroken. Arun, confused by the sudden departure of the guests, soon learns the horrifying truth about his beloved daughter. Consumed by anger and grief, Arun and Taj rush to report the crime to the authorities. However, the police officers dismiss their concerns, more focused on watching a sports match than addressing the serious matter at hand. Enraged, Arun smashes the television in frustration, finally compelling the officers to take action. Determined to gather more information, the police visit Bhumi's home, only to discover that she has disappeared. The entire village joins the search, but it is soon revealed that Vishal and Dolly have kidnapped her again, this time taking her to a remote forest. It was revealed that the group had learned that Arun had reported the crime to the authorities and were determined to silence Bhumi permanently. During this ordeal, Bhumi realizes that Vishal and his accomplices are the ones who assaulted her. They subject her to brutal torture, leaving her broken and desperate. Shortly after, on a dead-end bridge, Bhumi attempts to do the unthinkable, but Ghulam restrains her. In a final act of cruelty, Dolly cuts off her hair before she ultimately falls into the river, where she is shot multiple times. Miraculously, Bhumi survives and is rushed to a hospital for treatment. Her father, Arun, is devastated to see his beloved daughter suffering so profoundly because of the monstrous actions of her attackers. When Bhumi regains consciousness, she recounts the entire ordeal to her father, revealing the identities of the men who violated her. Elsewhere, Dolly receives news that Bhumi is still alive and hospitalized. The case eventually goes to trial, with Vishal, Dolly, and Ghulam as the accused. However, they hire a highly skilled lawyer who uses her expertise to shield the criminals. At that moment, the lawyer relentlessly undermines Bhumi's credibility, painting her as a liar and a manipulator. Watching his daughter being humiliated in court, Arun can no longer bear it. He folds his hands in desperation and addresses the courtroom, declaring that he is grateful his daughter is still alive. His emotional outburst silences the lawyer, who, for a moment, seems to feel the weight of her own guilt for defending such heinous individuals. Not only that, but everyone present in the courtroom is unable to hold back their tears as they witness the profound sorrow, anger, and pity of a father who has seen his daughter humiliated and cornered. Eventually, Arun and Bhumi apologize to the criminals and decide to withdraw their complaint. Arun is utterly shattered and apologizes to his daughter, admitting that he could not deliver justice for her. After this heartbreaking moment, they attempt to return to their normal lives, but their days are shadowed by grief, with no trace of happiness visible in either the father or the daughter. One day, Bhumi's neighbors suggest that she leave the village, claiming that she has brought shame to their community. Arun, upon hearing this, is enraged. He destroys the cars of the very neighbors whom Bhumi had once helped, furious that they would now repay her kindness by ostracizing her for a crime that was never her fault. The neighbors fall silent, cowed by Arun's uncontrollable fury. The next day, Bhumi is visited by Jita's older sister, Vishal's mother, Dolly's wife, and Ghulam's child. Jita's sister hands over a phone containing a video recording of the assault on Bhumi, committed by those very criminals. As the truth unravels, it becomes clear that Jitu was also involved in the crime. Shockingly, he participated in the assault on Bhumi, the woman he had once considered an older sister. Apparently, the families of the perpetrators come to apologize to Arun and Bhumi, but Arun, consumed by anger, folds his hands and gestures for them to leave his home. After learning the full truth, Bhumi urges her father to kill all those responsible. Arun responds that it is not just his duty, but theirs together. With the help of Taj, they set out on a mission for justice. First, they kidnap Jitu. At first, Jita pretends to know nothing about the horrific crime committed against Bhumi. However, as Arun and Taj lay out his crimes one by one, from lacing sweets from Vishal's shop with drugs, to faking the need to relieve himself during the kidnapping, to informing Vishal about Arun's police report, and finally to alerting Dolly that Bhumi had survived and was in the hospital, Jita's guilt becomes undeniable. He was the linchpin in the conspiracy, facilitating the crime and even participating in the assault, recording the act as a final act of cruelty. Overwhelmed, Jita breaks down in tears and begs for forgiveness. However, Because minors in their country rarely face severe punishment, Arun decides to take matters into his own hands. He subjects Jitu to slow, excruciating torture, vowing to kill him once he turns 18. During his captivity, Jitu is tormented relentlessly, left powerless and broken. Eventually, Jitu is dressed up like a woman, and on the day he turns 18, Arun prepares to carry out his promise. Jitu, trembling with fear, cries and pleads for mercy, but Arun forces him to face his fate. In a final act of terror, Jitu, unable to bear the pressure, doing the unthinkable in front of them. The next morning, Jita's body is discovered. His father mourns the loss of his son, but Jita's older sister shows no sign of grief. Soon after, the police officer who had previously handled Arun's case approaches Jita's sister and hands her a letter found at the scene. In the letter, Jita claims to do the unthinkable. However, the officer senses there is more to this case. The story moves forward, and the second target is Vishal. Arun begins to haunt Vishal, following him wherever he goes. As a result, Vishal grows increasingly terrified, unable to escape the piercing gaze of Arun. Meanwhile, Ghulam, who is seen at his base, is confronted by Arun. As Ghulam is a tattoo artist, Arun forces him to tattoo the word rapist on his forehead. Humiliated and enraged, Ghulam reports the incident to Dolly. Vishal is also present, visibly anxious and trembling with fear. On the roadside, Arun is stopped by the same police officer who investigated Jita's death. The officer hands Arun a keychain belonging to him, which was found at the scene. The officer then advises Arun that if he wants to succeed in his mission, he must be careful and leave no trace of evidence behind. It becomes clear that the officer knows the criminals are guilty and is quietly allowing Arun to exact his revenge. Meanwhile, Ghulam confronts Bhumi at her home, destroying her belongings, including a cherished radio left behind by her late mother. Just as the situation escalates, Taj arrives with the help of neighbors to rescue Bhumi. However, in a tragic turn of events, Ghulam slams Taj's head into an electric pole, killing him instantly. Witnessing the death of his close friend, Arun becomes even more determined to eliminate every last one of the criminals. Without delay, Arun tracks down Ghulam. Armed with an iron rod, he brutally attacks Ghulam, leaving him helpless. Once Ghulam is incapacitated, Arun drags him to a nearby railway track and leaves him there. Moments later, a train speeds by, ending Ghulam's life in a gruesome and fitting manner. Upon hearing of Ghulam's death, Vishal becomes increasingly terrified and decides to flee the village by boarding a public bus. However, during the journey, Arun intercepts the bus, forcing all the passengers to disembark and leaving Vishal alone. At that moment, Vishal pleads for mercy, but Arun, consumed by rage, slams Vishal's head repeatedly against the metal poles of the bus. Arun then pulls out a knife and offers Vishal a grim choice: either slit his throat or sever another part of his body. In the end, Vishal, paralyzed by fear, meets his end at Arun's hands. Arun then commandeers the bus, driving it toward Dolly's location. Unbeknownst to him, Dolly is already waiting with his henchmen, prepared for a confrontation. When Arun arrives, he drags out Vishal's lifeless body and tosses it before Dolly. At that, a fierce brawl erupts between Arun and Dolly's men. Despite his injuries, Arun fights with relentless determination. However, Dolly manages to stab Arun in the stomach with a metal rod, leaving him severely wounded. Dolly then taunts Arun, threatening to harm Bhumi once more, and flaunts her scarf as a cruel reminder of her suffering. Enraged and fueled by a father's love, Arun pulls the rod from his stomach and launches a furious counterattack, overpowering Dolly's men and driving the same rod into Dolly's leg. Dolly limps away in pain, stumbling through a crowd of women performing a ritual celebration. At the same time, Arun pursues him relentlessly, his resolve unshaken. Shortly after, Dolly seeks refuge in a temple, but Arun follows him inside, delivering a brutal beating. He breaks Dolly's arms and legs, leaving him helpless. As Dolly crawls toward the edge of a cliff overlooking a sacred pool, Arun grabs him by the hair, preventing him from falling. Dolly begs for his life, but Arun coldly declares that rapists deserve to die in this manner. Bhumi, who has arrived at the scene, steps forward and cuts Dolly's hair, mirroring the humiliation he had once inflicted upon her. At the same time, the women performing the ritual watch in solemn silence as justice is served. Finally, Arun releases Dolly, who plummets into the pool below and drowns. Bhumi then throws her scarf into the water, followed by the scarves of the women present, symbolizing the end of her torment and the restoration of her dignity. With Dolly's death, Arun embraces Bhumi and whispers that everything is over. Moral lesson from the story: if you're going to confess your love to someone, maybe don't do it right before their wedding. It's awkward, and you might end up with a slap instead of a hug. Also, if you're going to be late picking someone up, at least bring snacks to avoid getting scolded by your older sister.